The military academy of Citadel Vare hung above the storm world Karin like a blade someone had forgot to sheathe. From the outside, it looked clean and perfect. All black armor plating, cold blue shield lights, and long observation windows cut into a ring of steel. From the inside, it was something else entirely. It was pressure. Pressure in the halls, pressure in the classrooms, pressure in the lungs every time an instructor stopped beside your desk and decided whether you were worth turning into an officer or worth grinding into a warning for everyone else. Cadet Adrian Vale had been at Citadel Vare for 9 months, and by then the academy had given up trying to break him in ordinary ways. He was not loud. He was not rebellious. He did not skip drills, talk back in formation, or throw punches in the mess hall. His uniform was always clean. His scores were high. His bunk was neat enough to satisfy even the inspection drones. The problem, according to 3 formal reports and 1 less formal shouting match overheard outside Tactical Hall 2, was that Adrian had the deeply irritating habit of seeing exactly what other people wanted missed. He noticed stress fractures in plans, cracks in orders, and little pieces of bad logic that men with rank had already decided were too expensive or embarrassing to admit. That was how he made an enemy of senior instructor Raul Threx, a decorated veteran who taught battlefield entrapment and believed fear was the foundation of discipline. On the morning everything changed, Threx stood before 200 cadets in the strategy amphitheater, pacing around a holographic canyon battlefield while he explained his latest encirclement model in a voice that filled the room like artillery. Once the enemy commits to the central path, he said, tapping a glowing blue flank line into place, they are cut from retreat, supply, and air cover in under 90 seconds. No hesitation, no mercy. Precision ends wars. Around him, the hologram shone in careful layers of elevation data, troop vectors, and kill probabilities. Most cadets copied notes as fast as they could. Adrian studied the ground model instead. He watched the contour beneath the simulated canyon floor, the mineral scan, the thermal drift, the strange little flicker in the lower left data column that kept refreshing 1/2 second too late. He raised his hand. The room tightened immediately. Everyone knew that look on Threx's face, the one that meant he already hated the question before hearing it. "Yes, Cadet Vale?" the instructor asked, every word polished sharp. Adrian stood. "Sir, your flanking route crosses a subcrust ion seam at grid marker 14. Threx stared at him. And your heavy rifles use polarized capacitor stacks," Adrian said. "If they cross that seam, the charge alignment collapses. Your whole left wing reaches the kill line carrying dead weapons." There was silence after that, the dangerous kind, the kind that makes people stop breathing because they can feel a career coming apart in real time. Threx turned back to the map. He checked the mineral layer once, then twice. His shoulders locked. Somewhere high in the director's gallery, one of the observers shifted in their seat. Somewhere in the rear rows, someone made a sound that might have been a laugh and tried to swallow it too late. Threx slowly looked back at Adrian and saw, not insolence, not smugness, only calm. That made it worse. "Sit down," he said. Adrian did. The lecture ended 6 minutes early. From that day on, punishment became a language between them. Adrian was assigned double hazard maintenance in the lower engine crawlways. He lost rec time, communication privileges, and half his sleep cycle to corrective tasks that always somehow involved rust, cold water, or narrow shafts full of live wiring. Threx watched him endure all of it with the same quiet focus Adrian brought to tactical maps. The human never pleaded, never snapped, never even acted proud about it. He just finished what was put in front of him and moved on. That made Threx look less like a master shaping a cadet, and more like a man striking a wall to prove he still had hands. What Adrian did not know was that the instructor's anger had already turned into something colder. During that simulation, while most of the class had watched the moving troops, Adrian's eyes had flicked once toward a secondary command layer that should not have been visible at all. It was there only for a moment, but it was enough. Threx had seen him see it. Altered beacon routes, quiet supply redirections, unauthorized transit patterns feeding through academy channels and into a sealed operations registry no cadet should ever touch. Adrian had said nothing, but Threx knew the type. Quiet minds were the worst kind. They built cases in silence. So when the deployment order appeared on Adrian's terminal 3 days later, it looked like nothing more than a cruel field lesson. 3-day surface reconnaissance on Karin's moon Vanta. Hazard sector. Escort attached. No one below command level would think twice, but the escort made the whole thing ugly. Adrian was not being sent with a training unit. He was being sent with Widow Section, the Academy's most feared alien squad, a 6-member deep field strike team whose name moved through the barracks like a ghost story. They were not popular. They were not admired in the ordinary sense. They were respected the way knives were respected. Every cadet knew a different rumor about them, that they could track a target by heat wake alone, that they trained in silence for months at a time, that 3 instructors had lost command arguments with them and never tried again. When Adrian read the squad designation, the cadet beside him in the mess hall nearly stopped chewing. "Widow Section," the boy whispered. "What did you do?" Adrian looked down at the order, then folded the screen closed. Apparently, he said, I kept noticing things. The transport down to Vanta was rough enough to bruise through the crash webbing, but Adrian spent most of the descent reading the attached terrain file and making notes in the margin. The moon below was a broken world of dark glass forests, mineral fog, and stone plains that turned sound against itself. The Academy called it an adaptive field environment. The lower-rank cadets called it the place people got sent when an instructor wanted whether to finish an argument. By the time the ramp dropped, Widow's section was already waiting outside in a loose line under the pale silver sky. They did not stand like ordinary soldiers. Ordinary soldiers made a shape. These 6 made a perimeter without seeming to. Their armor was matte black, their movements spare and economical, and each of them carried their danger differently. The one in front, tall and narrow-faced with 3 dark eyes and a vertical scar through one cheekplate ridge, had to be the leader. To her left stood a broad, stone-heavy tracker whose boots looked built to crush terrain into obedience. On the far side was a medic with pale gloves and the dead calm of someone who had seen too much blood to waste emotion on the idea of more. Adrian stepped down from the ramp, felt the strange pressure of Vanta's thin, cold air, and looked up into the humming canopy of crystal-veined trees. The sound they made in the charged wind was low and layered, not random at all. That's not interference, he said before thinking better of it. It's a chord. Nobody answered. 6 alien faces watched him as if the transport had unloaded a maintenance droid by mistake. Adrian adjusted the strap on his pack and finally met the leader's eyes. Cadet Adrian Vale, he said. I read the route file on the way down. The West Beacon chain is wrong by at least half a degree. If we follow the Academy path exactly, it'll walk us into the sink basin by nightfall. The leader's expression did not change, but something in the squad's silence sharpened. You just got here, she said. Her voice was flat and cool enough to frost metal. Adrian nodded once. Yes, she took one slow step toward him. Then here is your first lesson, human. You speak when asked. Adrian looked past her to the dark horizon, then back to the squad. Understood, he said. I just thought you'd rather be insulted now than dead later. For the first time, one of them almost smiled. It was not the leader. It was the medic. And that, more than the cold air or the ruined sky or the lethal quiet of Vanta, told Adrian this mission was going to change everything. Widow's section moved out without another word, and Adrian learned within the first 10 minutes that the squad did not walk so much as cut through terrain with mathematical contempt. The leader introduced herself only once, and only because he needed to know who was giving orders. Section Lead Sally's Varn, she said, never looking back as she took point along the basalt ridge. You will address me as Lead Varn until you earn anything else. The heavy tracker to her right gave Adrian one slow glance and a name that sounded more like a warning than an introduction. Droth, the medic, the one who had nearly smiled at the shuttle ramp, adjusted the fit of her pale gloves and said, Myra Tell. The others offered even less. Narrow infiltration specialist with skin like dark polished stone tapped 2 fingers against her chest and said, Nix. A demolitions expert with gold-tinted eye shields and an expression of permanent disappointment muttered, Peller. The last was their local guide, a lean native-born operative called Orenkesh, who spoke only after they had crossed into the first field of crystal grass. Step where I step, he said. This moon remembers bad footwork. Adrian almost asked what that meant, but the way the silver-blue grass trembled in the charged wind answered for him. Every blade was hollow. Every shift in the air turned the field into a whispering instrument. One wrong stomp would set off an acoustic cascade and announce their position to anything with ears for miles. So he watched. He watched Oren's foot placement, Droth's gait, the exact rhythm with which Sally's angled them around broken stone outcrops and magnetized root beds. He kept his pack close, his breathing measured, and his questions inside his teeth. The squad expected him to fall behind, that much was obvious. They lengthened their strides slightly whenever the path opened, the kind of subtle cruelty professionals practiced without bothering to name it. Adrian let them. Then he matched it, not by forcing speed, by wasting nothing. He took the dead patches in the crystal moss, rolled his weight off the heel the moment he felt unstable charge underfoot, and let the terrain show him where it did not want pressure. Half an hour later, Lead Varn slowed just enough to check the spread of her team. And that was when she realized he was still exactly where he should be, neither dragging nor crowding anyone. Peller noticed too and clicked his tongue in irritation. You are trying very hard, he said over one shoulder, to be impressive. Adrian kept his eyes on the line of dark rock ahead. No, he said. I'm trying not to die in a place that clearly enjoys it. Nix, gliding along the shadow side of the formation, made a sound that might have been a laugh if she had trusted herself with the full thing. They crossed a dry basin 2 hours later and found the first proof that Adrian had been right about the route file. The western beacon was there, but not where the Academy said it would be. It had been moved 47 meters east and driven into softer ground near the lip of a subsurface wash. Droth found it first when the earth answered wrong under his boots. He dropped to one knee, pressed his broad palm to the black soil, and frowned. This basin is hollow. Oren froze mid-step. It should not be. Adrian crouched by the beacon post, brushed a film of mineral dust from the lower housing, and saw fresh tools scoring under the Academy seal. It was repositioned recently, he said. Not field erosion, manual reset. Sally's turned then, really turned, fixing all three of her dark eyes on him. You saw that from the shuttle file? I saw a half-degree drift and a timing offset in the nav refresh. He looked up at her. Someone changed the path and didn't update the terrain prediction around it. Myra crouched on the opposite side and ran a scanner over the anchor bolt. The readout pulsed amber. Fresh compression stress, she said quietly. A few days old at most. Peller's jaw tightened behind the tinted shields. Oren stared out across the basin as if the ground itself had lied to him personally. For the first time since they left the shuttle, the squad's irritation shifted into something more careful. Adrian felt it happen like a weather change. He did not know yet whether that was good or bad. They rerouted east through a stand of resonance trunks that rose like glass-black pillars into the pale sky. The wind moving through them produced layered tones, thin and metallic near the top, deep and throat-like near the roots. Adrian found himself cataloging the notes without meaning to. B-flat, then a warped minor third, then something dissonant and broken whenever the current hit the damaged branches on the north side. Stop listening like that, Oren said suddenly from ahead. Adrian blinked. Like what? Like you think it is music? Adrian hesitated, then answered honestly. It is. Oren gave him a long, unreadable look. That is either useful or dangerous. I have not decided. The path narrowed into a split shelf above a sink crack, and that was where the first real problem hit. Myra's auxiliary respirator canister clipped a jagged crystal spur as she turned sideways past the rock face. The casing opened with a soft hiss. Not a dramatic rupture, just enough. On Vanta, enough was deadly. The moon's lower pockets held charged particulate that could scar lung tissue within the hour if the filter seal failed. Myra felt it instantly. Her hand went to the damaged canister and Sally spun at the sound. Report! Auxiliary breach, Myra said, already reaching for her med kit. Peller cursed. Droth started to step in front of her by instinct, shielding her from the wind while she worked, but Adrian was already moving. He dropped his pack, dug through the outer tool roll, and came up with a strip of resin polymer, one field battery cell, and a hand-sized clamp. Hold still, he said. Myra stared at him. You are not med-certified. No, Adrian replied, kneeling by her shoulder. I'm salvage certified, which is worse but faster. Before Sally's could stop him, Adrian pressed the polymer strip into the hairline crack, snapped the battery casing to expose the thermal core, and held the heat just near enough to flash-cure the resin without warping the canister housing. He counted under his breath, pulled the heat away, then sealed the clamp over the patch for 3 seconds to set pressure alignment. When he let go, the hiss was gone. Myra tested the intake, listened, then looked at him with something very close to surprise. Ugly repair, she said. Adrian repacked his kit. Still airtight. Peller stared openly now. Where did you learn that? Adrian slung the pack back over one shoulder. My family pulled wreckage out of flooded shipyards on Earth. If your suit failed down there, you fixed it before you drowned. Clean repairs were for people with spare parts. No one answered immediately. Then Droth gave one slow grunt, not approval exactly, but not dismissal either. Later, during the first halt, when the temperature dropped and the wind started to bite through their armor seals, Adrian unpacked his canteen, a small coil heater, and a vacuum pouch of bitter black grounds. Peller wrinkled his nose as the smell rose into the cold. That smells like burned wiring. Coffee, Adrian said. Same difference, depending on who makes it. He poured the steaming liquid into the metal cap, took one sip, then set it on a flat stone between them and leaned back against the ridge wall without offering commentary. For a full minute, nobody touched it. Then Droth picked it up, drank, made a face like he had been insulted in 3 languages, and passed it to Myra anyway. Nix took the next sip. Then Oren. Even Sally's, after watching the cup make the whole circle, lifted it once and drank with the expression of a commander accepting a temporary alliance with bad decisions. When the cap reached Adrian again, it was empty. He looked at the squad, at the cold, at the silence that no longer felt edged the same way, and said only, I can make more tomorrow. Sally studied him in the fading light. Do that, she said. It was not praise. It was not friendship. But it was the first order she had given him that sounded almost like trust. By the second day, the route had stopped feeling like a reconnaissance sweep, and started feeling like a lie someone had spent time polishing. The beacon chain kept pulling them west in tiny, almost innocent corrections, each one small enough to pass as ordinary drift if you were tired, cold, or too trusting of Academy hardware to question it. Adrian questioned it anyway. He had been doing little else since they left the shuttle. Around midday, the squad reached a high shelf of black quartz overlooking a hollow basin full of pale hanging reeds that chimed softly in the wind. The sound should have spread outward. Instead, it folded back in on itself, circling the basin in a repeating spiral. Adrian heard it first, not because his ears were better than theirs, but because his mind could not leave broken patterns alone. He stopped so abruptly that Nix nearly walked into him. Don't go down there, he said. Droth turned, irritation already rising. Explain. Adrian crouched at the shelf edge and watched the reed shadows move. The echo is wrong. Everything in that basin is feeding inward. Oren came to his side, eyes narrowing. He listened for 5 long seconds, then looked up sharply. He's right. Saley stepped forward. How wrong? Oren's mouth thinned. Engineered wrong. Natural echo scatters. This is a catchment, a sound sink. Peller swore softly. Trap geometry. Myra scanned the nearest route marker and felt her jaw tight. The Academy map still says low-risk traverse. Adrian pointed toward the basin floor, where a thin line of black stone cut through the reeds like an old scar. That seam wasn't in the shuttle file either. If something's sleeping under there, the route walks us right over its mouth. Saley's did not waste a second. We reroute north. Then, after the briefest pause, she added, Good catch, Vale. It was the first time she had used his name without freezing it in sarcasm, and for some reason that hit harder than any praise would have. It made the north climb in silence until the terrain narrowed into a broken rib of stone above the basin. That was where the moon chose to stop hiding its teeth. A storm front moved over the ridge with almost no warning, not rain, not lightning, but a pressure wave that hit the crystal reeds below and turned the whole basin into a screaming instrument. The reeds vibrated at once. The black seam on the basin floor split. What climbed out of it did not resemble anything in the Academy bestiary. The creatures were long and jointed, 6-limbed things plated in translucent mineral shell, their bodies catching and bending the light until they seemed half there and half elsewhere. They moved by tracking vibration, not sight, and the shrieking basin had just told them exactly where prey waited. Back! Oren snapped, but one of the creatures had already vaulted up the rib in a shower of black dust. Droth met it head-on, slamming his armored shoulder into its chest and knocking both of them sideways into the stone. Nyx vanished instantly, dropping below the ledge for a flanking angle, while Peller dragged a charge from his harness and began setting it with the concentration of a man composing music under gunfire. Another creature surged up from the basin and cut off Myra from the rest of them. Its forelimbs hit the rock with a sound like glass knives scraping steel. Myra drew her sidearm, fired twice, and only made it angrier. Adrian saw the problem in a blink. The shells were diffusing directed fire along the ribbed plating, kinetic spread, not penetration. Don't shoot center mass, he shouted. Hit the joints. Nobody had time to answer. The creature reared for Myra's throat. Adrian yanked the thermal cup from his pack, slammed the still-hot coil against the emergency flare cylinder attached to it, and hurled the whole improvised mess straight past Myra's shoulder. The cup burst against the rock wall behind the creature in a violent hiss of heat and steam. The thing spun toward the sudden vibration and lunged the wrong way. That was all Myra needed. She dropped to one knee and drove a cutting round through the narrow hinge under its foreleg. The limb came off in a spray of glowing fluid. I hate when you're useful, Peller called as he detonated his charge under a second creature's climbing path and blew half the ledge out from beneath it. Nyx appeared out of nowhere behind the third, silent as a knife shadow, and opened its spine from neck to tail with one perfect strike. Then it was over. The remaining shapes sank back into the screaming basin as fast as they had risen, the storm front moving past and taking the pressure wave with it. Silence crashed down so suddenly it made Adrian's ears ring. Myra was breathing hard, one glove slick with her own blood from a shallow cut along the wrist, but she was alive. She looked at Adrian, then at the shattered thermal cup on the rock. You threw your coffee at it. Adrian checked to make sure all his major organs still seemed present. I did, he said. Myra stared another second, then laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. All right, she said. Now you're definitely staying. They found the proof an hour later. North of the basin, hidden under a shelf of collapsed shale, Droth uncovered a secondary Academy beacon sealed inside a weatherproof casing that should not have been on the map at all. Oren cut the shell open. Inside was a fresh guidance core with a live override key still warm from recent use. Peller read the registry and went perfectly still. Instructor class authorization, he said. Recent? Saley's took the core from him and stared at the code stamp until something in her face went cold and dangerous. Threx, Adrian looked up. You're sure? I would know his registry signature blind. None of them spoke for a moment after that. The truth did not need much decoration. The altered route, the missing terrain faults, the basin trap, the fresh override. This was not a harsh field exercise anymore. It was a culling with paperwork. Nyx broke the silence first. So the question is not whether he wants Vale dead. She looked at the others one by one. The question is whether he wants all of us dead for being here with him. That landed hard, hard enough that even Droth's expression shifted. Myra crouched beside the cracked beacon shell and said quietly, If we go back by the official route, we walk where he tells us to walk. We do not go back by any official route, Saley said. She looked at Adrian then, really looked, not like a problem or a burden, but like part of the equation that might keep them breathing. You noticed him before the rest of us did. Start being difficult on purpose. Adrian rose, adjusted the strap on his pack, and glanced toward the darkening line of northern ridges. That, he said, I can do. Above them, the light over Vanta turned from silver to bruised violet, and the moon's long night began to close around the squad like something listening. It did not stop until the last of the violet daylight had bled out of Vanta's sky. and the cold rose hard enough from the black stone to ache through boot soles and armor seals alike. Sailors drove them north off every official marker line, cutting across a maze of shattered ridges and dead crystal flats that even Orin only knew from old patrol scars and half-forgotten warning songs. Nobody argued. Not after the basin, not after the fresh override core and the beacon shell. The silence inside the squad had changed shape again. Before, they had been enduring Adrian. Now they were counting on him the way soldiers counted on extra oxygen they had not expected to find. Droth took point through the steepest climbs, testing each ledge before anyone committed weight to it. Myra kept checking Adrian's wrists and throat for signs of acoustic fatigue, even when he insisted he was fine. Nyx vanished and reappeared like a shadow, learning to trust the firelight. Peller muttered root geometry under his breath and planted micro-markers in the stone to cover their retreat if the terrain turned on them again. Orin listened to the wind with his head half-tilted, reading the night like a man eavesdropping on an argument the moon was trying to hide. 2 hours after full dark, the storm hit. It came down from the upper ridges not as rain, but as charged silver fog wrapped around pulses of deep bass resonance that made the air itself feel bruised. The crystal spines rising from the valley walls caught the pressure and turned it inward. Every gust became a note. Every note became a vibration crawling up through bone. "Shelter," Orin snapped. Now, he led them into a narrow fault crack in the rock wall just as the first real wave rolled through. The fissure opened into a compressed chamber of dark quartz no larger than a cargo locker. They packed in shoulder to shoulder, 7 bodies and all their gear crushed into a slice of black stone while the storm sang outside like an engine trying to tear itself apart. The sound inside the chamber was worse. It did not echo. It multiplied. Adrian could hear everyone breathing as if their lungs were his own. He could hear Myra's gloves creak as she flexed her hands. He could hear the faint, dry rasp of Peller's jaw when he clenched his teeth. And then he heard something else. A thin, high whine, mechanical, rhythmic. It was coming from the base of Sally's skull. Adrian turned his head. In the dim glow of a chem stick, he saw a pale crescent scar where her collar had shifted open. Then he looked at Droth. Same scar. Myra, same place. Nyx, Peller, Orin, not battle wounds, not old surgery by chance. Identical. "What are those?" he asked before he could stop himself. Myra answered first, perhaps because the storm outside had already stripped them of the luxury of pretending. "Control lattices," she said quietly. "Subspinal. Instructor authorized squads only." Adrian stared. "Control as in tracking." Peller let out a humorless laugh. "Tracking would be merciful." Sally's kept her eyes on the chamber mouth. "Pain compliance, motor lock, reflex dampening, memory interruption if command chooses to be thorough. You are looking at why Widow Section never publicly says no." The next pulse hit before Adrian could answer. All 6 of them jerked at once. Droth slammed back into the wall with a strangled grunt. Myra's knees buckled. Peller's hand spasmed so hard his detonator tool clattered across the stone. Sally's went rigid, one palm braced to the wall, 3 eyes wide and furious. The thin whine at the base of their skulls jumped into a shrill cutting tone. Adrian was the only one still steady. He understood the pattern half a second later. The storm was not just loud. It was acting like a carrier wave. The altered beacons they had passed were feeding command pulses into the atmosphere, and the quartz around them was amplifying the return. "He's pinging the lattices through the storm," Adrian said. "He doesn't know exactly where we are, so he's flooding the sector." Orin dropped hard to one knee, both hands at his neck. "Can you stop it?" Adrian looked around the cramped chamber, at the black quartz walls, at the emergency field kit hanging from Myra's side, at the stripped beacon core Peller had kept as evidence. "Maybe," he said, "but it'll be ugly." Sally's actually managed a strained breath that might have been approval. "Ugly as allowed." Adrian moved fast. He tore 2 thermal blankets from his pack, wrapped them around the beacon core, and jammed the bundle between a split in the quartz wall where the vibration felt strongest. Then he yanked the emergency induction loop from Myra's med kit and spliced its contacts into the core using the stripped copper from Peller's micromarker line. "What are you building?" Myra asked through clenched teeth. Adrian twisted the final connection and braced the bundle with his boot. "A false ground. If the storm wants a stable route for the command pulse, I'm giving it one that ends in rock instead of your spines." He snapped the loop live. The chamber filled with a flat, ugly harmonic buzz, low and constant. The shrill whine in the squad's implants broke apart almost instantly. Droth sagged against the wall and took a desperate breath. Myra's hands steadied. Sally slowly straightened, rolling her neck once as if she wanted to kill something with it. Nyx, pale and furious in the green chem light, looked at Adrian with open shock for the first time since they met. "You carry this kind of knowledge around casually?" Adrian sat back against the stone, breathing hard now that the crisis had moved on to everyone else. "My family salvaged pressure rigs and flood wrecks on Earth. When a system starts trying to kill you through the walls, you learn to lie to it." Peller picked up his dropped tool, studied the crude, buzzing ground loop, and said, with profound reluctance, "I may dislike you less now." The storm spent itself an hour later, but the chamber stayed quiet long after the worst of the sound had passed. Nobody rushed to fill the silence. On Vanta, Trust did not arrive in speeches. It arrived in what people handed you when they could no longer afford not to. Sally's finally pulled a slim black data wafer from a sealed compartment inside her chest plate and held it out to Adrian. "This is our real root library," she said. "Not Academy issue. Oren mapped it over 6 years. Safe hollows, dead zones, old extraction points, magnetic fractures, everything the official grid edits out." Adrian looked at the wafer, then at her. "You're giving me this?" "I am correcting a mistake," Sally's replied. "You were never cargo Vale. Threx did not send you with us to be humbled. He sent all of us out there to disappear." Oren's voice came low from the chamber mouth where he had gone still again. "He's right." Everyone looked at him. The guide's face had gone flat with dread. "The wind changed. There are drones on the ridge above us, not Academy Rescue Hunter models." Myra went cold. "How many?" Oren listened once more and answered, "Enough to make us honest." Sally slid her helmet back into place and sealed it with a hiss. Then she looked at Adrian, no rank in her eyes now, only decision. "Then be difficult on purpose," she said. "From this point on, you move as Widow Section." They moved within 30 seconds of Sally's giving the order, and the change in formation was so immediate Adrian almost missed what it meant. Up until then, even at their best, Widow Section had unconsciously arranged itself around him like he was fragile cargo that happened to be walking on his own. Now the shape tightened and shifted with practiced precision, and Adrian found himself not at the rear, not protected in the center, but slotted into the moving geometry of the squad as if a missing part had finally been acknowledged. Nyx dropped beside him long enough to tap 2 quick signs against her wrist and throat. "Stop! Quiet down!" she whispered. "The rest you learn by surviving." Then she vanished uphill into the dark like a piece of night changing its mind. Above them, hidden beyond the ridgeline, the hunter drones combed the storm-washed rock with faint blue scan pulses that rolled over the terrain in regular beats. Oren led them into a split basalt channel where the sound of their own boots died instead of echoing. "These aren't Academy trackers," he said softly. "They're cull drones." Droth's shoulders hardened. "Hunter class?" "Yes." Myra's voice came low over the private comm. "Then they're not here to find us. They're here to confirm a kill." Adrian glanced at Sally's. "How many?" "Enough," she answered. "Not enough if we stop acting hunted." That landed in the silence between them and became the plan before anyone named it. They reached a collapsed service shelf above an old mineral extraction trench and crouched under broken stone while the drones passed overhead. Lean black machines with segmented bodies and sensor crowns built like iron flowers. Adrian studied the pattern of their sweep and felt the answer click into place. "They're not searching the terrain," he whispered. "They're searching you." Myra looked over sharply. "Explain." Adrian pointed toward the thin scar at the base of Sally's skull, then toward the sweeping blue arcs. "The lattices, Threx already knows your hardware signatures. The drones don't need line of sight if they can follow your implant noise." Peller's jaw tightened. "Useful, I hate useful." Adrian ignored that. "Can you spare 3 emitters? Anything that still talks on squad frequencies." Nyx reappeared behind him so suddenly he almost cursed. "Why?" "Because if they're hunting a chorus," Adrian said, eyes still on the rhythm of the scanned pulses, "we give them the wrong singers." They built the trap in 5 minutes. Peller surrendered 3 trap beacons with the expression of a priest handing over sacred relics to a man with muddy hands. Myra stripped the recognition chips from their housings. Adrian wired the emitters to the stolen Academy beacon core and the flatline induction loop he had rigged in the quartz chamber. Oren positioned the false signatures across the trench in a loose crescent that matched the squad's moving spread. Droth wedged each one deep into the rock with 2 blows of his gauntlet. "If this fails," Peller muttered as Adrian twisted the last lead into place, "I will personally haunt your bloodline." Adrian checked the connection, blew dust off his fingers, and said, "Get in line." Sally's gave the hand sign to move. The squad melted into cover along the trench walls, while the 3 false emitters woke one by one. Blue lights blinked. Then came the signal burst, 6 perfect implant shadows blooming across the stone where no living body stood. The hunter drones reacted instantly. Their search pattern collapsed into a dive. 2 dropped into the trench mouth. A third circled high, recalibrating. The first machine hit the nearest false signature and plunged its kill spike through empty air and broken basalt. Peller smiled for the first time Adrian had seen and thumbed the detonation rune. The charge did not explode outward. It folded inward, pinning the drone in a ring of crushing pressure that snapped 2 of its legs off and drove it onto its side. The second drone pivoted toward the next signature, and Nyx fell on it from above, her blade punching through the sensor crown before the machine could scream a warning across the net. The third was smarter. It broke its dive early and tracked the real squad signal leaking from Droth's lattice when the big tracker shifted his weight. "Move!" Sally snapped. Too late. The drone fired a needle burst that slammed Droth backward into the trench wall hard enough to crack rock. Myra was beside him before he hit the ground, one hand on his chest plate, the other checking his pupils. "Concussive overload," she said. "He's still with us." Adrian slid down the trench to them and saw the real problem at once. Droth's lattice scar was glowing faint blue under the collar seam, the drone impact having kicked the implant into a hot diagnostic loop. It's broadcasting, Adrian said. That thing will keep pulling more. Myra's eyes narrowed. Can you stop it, temporarily? Do it. Adrian did not ask permission from Droth because pain made consent a luxury and time was cruel. He tore open the tracker's collar seal, clipped the induction lead across the implant housing, and grounded the line straight into the shattered drone shell still smoking beside them. The feedback hit with a violent crack. Droth roared, half from pain and half from fury, but the blue glow at his neck died immediately. Myra stared at Adrian for one beat too long. You just used a dead hunter drone as a sink. Adrian kept pressure on the lead until the reading flattened. I use whatever doesn't argue. When the trench went quiet again, Nix dragged the intact memory spindle from the crushed drone's thorax and dropped it into Sally's hand. They huddled under the rock shelf while Myra jacked the spindle into her field tablet. The file opened on the first try, which was almost worse than encryption. Threx had not expected anyone alive enough to read it. The command log scrolled in hard white text across the screen. Deployment Asset Widow Section Reclassified Disposable. Human Cadet Adrian Vale designated Witness Priority. Retrieval Optional. Contingency on Academy Reentry. Compliance Cascade at Dock Spine 3. Sally's read that line twice. So did everyone else. The words settled over them like frost. Peller broke the silence first. He was never sending us home. Oren's face had gone flat and distant in the way it did when anger got too old to flare hot. He was sending us somewhere useful to disappear. Adrian looked from the screen to the squad around him. 6 lethal people who had lived so long under control, they had almost forgotten what naked betrayal felt like. Then we don't go back the way he expects, he said. Sally's lifted her eyes to his. There was no hesitation in them now, no residue of command distance, only decision. No, she said. We go back where he can't bury us. She closed her hand around the drone spindle, then reached up and unclipped the black section patch from her shoulder plate. Without ceremony, she pressed it into Adrian's palm. Widow Section's insignia was simple, just a broken crescent and 6 strike marks around it. You wear that when we breach the station, she said. From this point on, no one drags you behind us. Adrian looked at the patch, then at the squad, then back at Sally's. That your version of friendship? Nix, from the shadows above them, answered before the leader could. No, she said. It's worse. It means we expect you to survive with us. They reached Citadel Vare under cover of a routine night cargo return. Riding inside a scarred maintenance shuttle Oren had pulled from the old extraction shelf. With a code chain, the Academy had forgotten to revoke. Nobody spoke much during the ascent. There was too much to decide and too much that had already been decided. Ira had sealed Droth's concussion bleed. Peller had wired the surviving Hunter drone spindle into a hard-case evidence block. Nix had copied the command log twice and hidden one copy somewhere on her body Adrian could not even guess. And Sally's had spent the whole climb staring through the shuttle's narrow forward slit at the blade-shaped fortress hanging above the storm world like a sentence waiting to be finished. Adrian sat opposite them with Widow Section's broken crescent patch fixed to his shoulder where Sally's had pressed it. And every time his fingers drifted toward it, he stopped them. Some things needed to feel strange for a while before they felt real. Dock Spine 3? He finally asked. Oren nodded without looking away from the console. That is where Threx expects the compliance cascade to trigger. Narrow ramp. Internal security hardpoints. No civilian traffic after midnight. Peller checked the charge indicator on a tool that was definitely not supposed to be on a maintenance shuttle and said, a perfect place to make 6 inconvenient bodies disappear and 1 human mistake with them. 7, Droth corrected from where he sat with an ice patch strapped under his collar. Peller glanced up. The tracker's heavy face remained as unreadable as a landslide, but he repeated it anyway. 7. Something warm and sharp moved through Adrian's chest at that, a feeling he had learned not to trust too quickly. Respect was one thing, belonging was another. He had spent enough of his life useful to people who still kept a door in their minds marked temporary. Widow Section did not seem built for temporary anymore. If he locks your lattices the moment we cross the threshold, Adrian said, then we don't enter as a squad. We enter as a broken maintenance return and force him to commit publicly. Sally's gaze shifted to him. Explain. Adrian leaned forward, elbows on knees, and tapped the hollow sketch Oren had thrown over the center console. Threx thinks in clean lines. He wants a sealed dock, a controlled narrative, a dead team, and 1 surviving cadet he can blame. We deny him the sealed part first. We dock noisy, damage alarms, hull stress, emergency medical call. We make sure half the lower bay staff sees us before any private security team can close the doors. Myra's eyes narrowed, already moving ahead. If he trips the compliance cascade in a public emergency response zone, witnesses see it. And if he waits, Adrian said, we control the first story in the room. Nix, silent until then, signed 3 quick motions Adrian had only learned 2 hours earlier. Risky, loud, better. Peller smiled with one corner of his mouth. The human is learning. No, Sally said, and for the first time there was something dangerously close to humor under the ice in her voice. He was always like this. We are merely late. The shuttle hit the outer docking guide with a jarring metallic slam that sent a shudder through the cabin and painted every face in red warning light. Oren had done that on purpose. The emergency beacon screamed alive at once. Hull breach advisory, medical response requested, dock crew attention mandatory. There, he murmured, hands steady on the controls. Now he has witnesses. They stepped off the ramp into chaos. Maintenance techs were already running toward the shuttle. 2 med officers closed behind. And the first thing they saw was Droth half-carrying Myra even though she was perfectly capable of walking. Because appearances mattered, and Nyx with blood painted artfully across one sleeve from a cut that had already been sealed, and Peller shouting about compromised atmospheric seals at a volume no one had known he possessed. Adrian came down last beside Sally's, tired enough to look honest and angry enough not to fake anything. The bay cameras swiveled. The med officers reached them. One opened her mouth to ask for an incident report and then stopped cold when she saw the state of the squad and the patch on Adrian's shoulder. Who authorized this? She demanded. I did, Sally said, and I am invoking Combat Return Review Understanding Academy law. That was the knife, not the demand, the law. It meant recorders had to open. It meant statements had to be logged. It meant no private disposal unless someone was willing to break procedure in front of a dozen lower-deck personnel and 3 active cameras, which, as it turned out, was exactly what senior instructor Raul Threx was arrogant enough to try. He arrived flanked by internal security less than 90 seconds later, immaculate as ever, black coat pressed, silver command braid neat at the shoulder, expression carefully arranged into controlled disappointment. He took in the public bay, the witnesses, the open record drones, and for one brief instant Adrian saw naked hatred break through the mask. Then Threx smoothed it away and became official again. Cadet Vale, he said, voice carrying just enough for the recorders. You were ordered into supervised reconnaissance. Explain why you have returned with stolen tactical insignia and a compromised strike unit. Adrian almost admired the speed of it. No greeting, no relief, straight to accusation. Sally's took one step forward. Watch your next word. Threx did not even look at her. Widow section will stand down and submit for implant stabilization immediately. His hand moved toward the wrist console that controlled instructor-class lattice overrides. Adrian saw it. Nyx saw it first. Her voice cut across the bay before he could finish the motion. Now, Widow section moved as one organism. Peller's jammer charge hit the floor at Threx's feet and burst with a flat pulse that killed local command frequencies for 6 seconds. It was not dramatic. It did not explode. It simply erased the smooth connection he relied on. At the same instant, Droth stepped into the security line and turned 3 armed officers into a problem of angles instead of authority, shoving one into a crate stack and wrenching another's weapon arm harmlessly toward the ceiling. Myra seized the med response gurney and rammed it sideways into the remaining guard pair, tangling them in their own feet before they could decide whether this was mutiny or triage. Oren killed the bay doors before lockdown could seal them. Nyx was already behind Threx by then, one blade resting under his jaw, not cutting, just making the future very easy to imagine. And Adrian ran straight for the nearest public recorder station, slammed Peller's evidence block into the port, and forced the bay's central display wall live. The command logs hit all at once. Altered beacon chains, disposal directives, hunter drone authorizations, witness priority on Adrian Vale, conditional squad termination at Dock Spine 3. The bay went dead silent, except for one maintenance loader still whining in reverse across the far wall. Threx tried to speak and found Nyx's blade pressing just enough harder to remind him what silence cost. Sally stepped into his line of sight and said, very clearly for the drones, tell them why a training instructor deployed cull drones against his own academy assets. Threx's face had gone white. For the first time since Adrian met him, he looked exactly what he was. Not powerful, cornered. You have no understanding of the wider strategic. Sally's hit him across the mouth with the back of her gauntlet hard enough to drop him to one knee. Wrong answer. Adrian turned from the display to the gathering crowd at the bay entrance. Cadets, officers, deck crews, all staring now at the evidence running in cold white script across the wall. Then he looked back at Threx. You wanted me thrown to the deadliest squad in the academy, he said quietly. You should have checked whether they were deadlier than you. That broke the room, not into violence, into certainty. Security command arrived 2 minutes later, too many witnesses already present, too much data live on too many feeds for anyone to bury. Threx was taken in irons, still trying to talk his way back into the hierarchy that had protected him, but the hierarchy had shifted, and he was too slow to feel it under his feet. The formal aftermath moved the way institutions always moved, cautiously, defensively, with polished language meant to make scandal sound administrative. But some truths were too plain for polish. Widow Section's lattice controls were suspended pending tribunal review. Their dockside actions were classified as necessary resistance under hostile command abuse. Adrian's disciplinary file vanished so completely it was almost art. 3 days later, when he walked into the strike wing briefing room expecting reassignment or quiet exile, he found all 6 of them already there, geared up, waiting. Peller tossed him a fresh field harness. Droth shifted aside to make room on the bench. Myra slid a medical patch kit across the table without comment. Nix flicked 2 signs at him. Late, sit down. And Sally's, standing at the center hollow with root light washing her face in blue, looked at the human as if there had never been any other place he was going to be. You wanted respect, Vale? She said. Adrian took the seat between them, the harness, the patch kit, the future opening like a door he had not dared touch. No, he answered honestly. I just wanted not to die. For the first time, all 6 of them smiled in their own ways. Sally's turned the map live. Good, she said, because if you're with us now, that goal remains ongoing.